On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks get a much needed win, although it was not fantastic all the way through, and they're back to 500. With this victory and three in a row, the Hawks are now 14 and 2 in the last 16 games at home, and Trae Young is out of his mind. 93 points in 2 games for Trae Young. We'll touch on all of that coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1198 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And thank you, as always, for making the Locked On Hawks podcast your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the newly launched YouTube channel. That we certainly could use your support on that. But thank you for listening to the show, as always. And today's podcast will be focusing on what became a 9-point win for the Hawks, 122 to 113 over the Blazers in a game that should have been a lot easier than it was. For Atlanta, in fact, they trailed by 15 points at one point in this one. But ignoring all of that until later on in the podcast, the Hawks get this victory, and they're now 500 for the first time in a long time. In fact, the Hawks are 34 and 34. Last time they were 500 was at 14 and 14 in mid-December. So a lot has changed. Basically, a half season has taken place since then. But because of their home success, the Hawks are back there. They're now 14 and 2 in the last 16 games at home, including 6 games in a row. And they win 3 games in a row now at home this week to get back to 500. And we'll touch on all of that. But Trae Young was the superstar in this one, as he often is. 46 points, 93 points in 2 days for Trae Young, obviously. And the Hawks were able to overcome some shoddy play in the first half. We'll get into all of the context, all of what transpired, and the hows and the whys. That was sort of the top lines. The Hawks get the victory here, and back to 500 they go for the first time in forever. As for the game itself, the Hawks were in a good spot, let's just say. It was a back-to-back for Atlanta, which is always tough, but with no travel, Portland had to come across the country after playing on Saturday night in Portland. And it was a rematch from January, which Trae hit 56 points against Portland. It was more full-strength Portland at that point, but still, Trae has obviously found some success against Portland this season. The Hawks, though, were also shorthanded in this game. John Collins was out again for Atlanta with both the finger sprain and the foot strain that he has. Chris Kersher shared a photo with a doctor and wrote about it on Monday. And the response from that doctor was not great on Collins' finger, which apparently cannot be straightened out all the way, and it can't be bent either, so not great there. And also, Collins told Kersher that he still has pain in his foot, which is not what you want to hear if you are John Collins. And really, this is an assumption. They've not said this, but it seems like Collins is not going to be 100% for a while if he does play. He even kind of openly, not necessarily discussed, but kind of just thought out loud about whether he was even helping the team. And you can certainly argue that him at 60% or whatever it's going to be may not help them. And I think if he's close to 100%, he obviously would help them. He's one of the best players. But clearly not his full self right now, and sort of an ominous reporting and the way that he was talking about it on Monday. But we'll see what happens in the coming days there. But also, it was not just Collins that was out in this game. Danilo Gallinari missed the game with right Achilles soreness that he's been managing all season long, apparently, according to Millen. And because of that, the Hawks were down their top 2 power forwards in this game. Jalen Johnson, for those asking and wondering, was actually on the road in Westchester, so not very close to Atlanta, with the College Park Skyhawks, and did not come back for this game. So that left the Hawks pretty shorthanded in some respects. Obviously, they had much better talent available than the Blazers did in this game, both up and down the roster. But that's worth noting that the Hawks were not their normal selves here either. The Blazers, let's just say, they had a very bad roster. So we talked about this a lot on last night's podcast, which, by the way, is still available on the podcast feed, about the Pacers game and the Hawks getting that win over Indiana. But I stressed on that podcast just how bad Indiana's roster was. But even then, they had Tyrese Halliburton, they had Buddy Hield, they had guys who have done things before. The Blazers in this game had a worse available roster than the Pacers did. And really, if you just kind of couple these rosters together, or take them out of the spot, if you just zoom out and say, look, this is probably the worst team the Hawks will face this season on paper and what was actually available, that was probably the case. Dame Lillard is obviously out for Portland, but also Yusuf Nurkic, Anthony Simons, Justice Winslow, Nas Little, Eric Bledsoe, all out. And really the only guy on Portland's roster that I would tell you is a definite NBA rotation player, not starter, but even a definite rotation player, is Josh Hart. And Josh Hart's really good, Maybe Drew Eubanks, who they just signed to a 10-day contract, by the way, would be the closest thing that I would say. But that kind of tells you it was Josh Hart and G League guys for the most part for Portland in this game. In fact, they actually signed old pal Chris Dunn, who fouled out in 20 minutes. Good to see Chris Dunn playing basketball again, but still kind of funny. And again, this is a worse roster than what Indiana had on Sunday. Kind of crazy, but that's what happened. As a result of all of that, even without Collins and without Gallinari, the Hawks were 14-point favorites in this game. On a back-to-back, without two of their top 7 or 8 guys, including their best power forward, that's pretty wild, just context-wise. Like, to have all of that go against you and still be favored by 14 points tells you just how bad Portland's spot was in this game. The Hawks, of course, did not cover, but that kind of tells you what it was supposed to be like in this game. So early on, actually, they started DeLon Wright, which I thought was a good decision in some respects. Obviously, no one's saying that he's better than Bogdanovich, who did not start. It kind of leaves Bogey in his role in second unit, etc. That was the thinking behind that. And Bogey ended up playing plenty of minutes, played 24 off the bench, even in a game where he was not his best by any stretch. But the Hawks actually scored well early and led early. It was a 14-2 run to go up by 7 in the early part of the first quarter. When Portland answered, take the lead, the Hawks really did not shoot the ball well at all in the entire game. There were some misses around the rim from Capella, misses on the perimeter from Bogdanovich and Herter from 3. Trae Young had kind of a slower start. Obviously, he went crazy in the third quarter, but before that, he wasn't super efficient. He was productive, but not super efficient by standards in the first half. Rotationally, they went to Okongwu and Bogdanovich as the first sub. No surprise there. Then Lou played with Trae for a while, and it was Kevin Knox as the backup power forward in the first half. In the second half, it was actually TLC, so I'm not sure if they just didn't like what they saw from Knox or they wanted to try both guys. But they went to a 9-man rotation in both halves. That was 2 different guys, so they ended up playing 10 in this spot. Defensively, it was kind of a mess. Overall, in transition, it was not good. They missed some matchup stuff, particularly when Capella left the floor. Trae was hunting his shot for sure. He took 11 shots in his first 9 minutes. He was definitely going after it the entire game, and with mixed success early and obviously increasing success during the game. The Hawks were down by 5 in the first quarter. The Blazers shot the ball very, very well, and the Hawks were scoring enough, but it was not because they were shooting well, which we'll kind of come back to later on. It was offensive rebounds and turnovers that kind of buoyed the Hawks the entire game. And Trae played the whole first quarter. They went to the bench, and the Hawks actually gave up an extended run of 40-24 to Portland. That's pretty crazy in itself. Blazers, as bad as they were, to go on that kind of run over about a full quarter of playing time. The Hawks were down by 9. I went and checked during the timeout in the first half, down 9. Our friends at BetOnline to see what the live line was, and the Hawks were still favored by 5.5 points at that stage. In fact, they were down 9 at the half and favored to win the game still, which, again, drives home the point about how bad Portland's projection was in this one. They had some really kind of rough stuff at the end of the first half. Capella actually had a great block and a great contest. They didn't score 3 possessions in a row. Trae got torched on the backdoor cut. That was kind of a bad brain fart for him defensively. And Hunter took a pretty bad fadeaway jump shot off offensive rebound he just didn't need to take. He was kind of struggling in the middle of this game. And then Trae took a very bad pull-up, kind of forced 3 on the right wing. And all of that happened. And then Trae got a technical foul with 5 seconds to go in the first half. Some obvious frustration. It seemed like a pretty quick trigger on the technical foul, to be fair to Trae. But it ended up being a possession of only 2 points for Portland, which actually was kind of a break for the Hawks. But I use the word hideous a lot. I use the word dreadful a few times on Twitter about the first half. They were truly awful in the first half. Aside from Trae being at least productive as a scorer and some good stuff on the periphery with the offensive rebounding and free throw line, etc., the Hawks losing a half to this Portland team by 9 points is just really, really bad, and that happened in this game. They had a 123 defensive rating before halftime. The Blazers shot the ball very well, 17 assists. The only bright spots defensively were the rebounding and the turnover creation for the Hawks, which actually continued the entire game. Offensively, it wasn't so bad like on an all-encompassing basis, but it was bad in context. They were 5 of 23 from 3 and 32% from the floor in the first half. They were saved by the free throw line and only had 2 turnovers, which is good. But Trae had 21 points on 20 shooting possessions before halftime. Now, that's not dreadful at all. It's not like this great production / efficiency. Bogey was 1 of 7 from the floor. Capella was 3 of 9 from the floor. Herter was 1 of 6 from 3. Nothing was going well on offense for the Hawks. And then defensively, it was obviously very, very bad. And I think that we'll get into all of what changed and what didn't and what was frustrating about this game in a moment. Before we get to all of that stuff, though, a word from our sponsors on the podcast. It's that time of year again as the tournament is finally upon us in college basketball with all the latest odds, totals, player props, futures, exotics, and much more. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. Beyond that, BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, your podcasts, and all of your news this season. And of course, it's not just basketball at BetOnline. They have a full slate of offerings that includes live betting and your favorite casino games, and all kinds of other sports between hockey and UFC, auto racing, boxing, tennis, golf, soccer, entertainment bets, horse racing odds, and even baseball as it gets back underway, plus all the props that you could possibly think of. Head to BetOnline right now or use a mobile device right now to learn more about all of the trends and all of the action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, well, I'm in the second half now, and it got worse before it got better. So the Hawks didn't score on their first 5 possessions in the second half. And Portland had 6 points in a row, and the Hawks were down by 15 points with 22 minutes to go. And then, coming out of a timeout, Hunter nearly airballed a three and then got a shot blocked in pretty maddening fashion. The vibes at that point, I tweeted this, were really, really bad. It did not feel like the Hawks had any juice whatsoever. Down 15, floundering, and obviously they weren't dead because Portland is not very good, but man, it was not going the right direction early in the third quarter. But then things started to shift. Capella had a huge block, and Trae got a layup, another stop. Trae got a 3-point play, another stop, and a 3 by Trae. So a personal 8-0 run by Trae, the Capella sort of walling off the rim defensively. That got the lead down to 7, and the Hawks actually became a 10-0 run overall. And at that point, the Hawks felt like they were back in the game, obviously. But Trae was clearly the story in terms of the broad landscape here. He scored 16 points in less than 4 minutes of clock time, which is just ludicrous. And when he was done with that spurt, the Hawks were down by only 1 after being down by 15 points. So the Hawks took the lead during the third quarter. And it was overall, by the way, a 31-6 run by the Hawks to go from down 15 to up by 10. Portland only had 4 points in almost 8 minutes of clock time. Now, this is actually kind of crazy. It obviously helped that Trae was unbelievable in that stretch, but they got a lot of stops. And really, if you wanted to point to the numbers, the Hawks were better on defense in that stretch than they were on offense. You know, Trae was kind of a one-man band at that point. But pretty crazy stuff there. The Hawks actually, for the full quarter, it was 31-17. It was kind of funny. It was a 6-0 run at the outset by Portland, then 31-6 by Atlanta, and then 5-0 by Portland at the end. But Trae had 21 of the 31 points. He had 42 points through 3 quarters. And again, ironically, this is the craziest part about this swing in the third quarter. The Hawks had almost exactly the same offensive efficiency in the third quarter as they had in the first half, which was not great. It was actually below their normal average. But Portland just fell off a cliff on offense. They were playing fast, tons of possessions, and not scoring. The Blazers had 8 turnovers in the third quarter alone, 38% shooting. The Hawks didn't even shoot well. This is the craziest thing. The Hawks go 31-17 in the quarter. They shot 10 of 27 from the field. Like, if I tell you that, you don't win a quarter by 14 points, ever, at 10 of 27 from the field. But Trae was 7 of 11 from the floor, and the Hawks were 8 of 8 at the free throw line overall. Hunter was 0 of 6 in the third. And again, I know it seems like it was, Trae taking over the game, which did happen. I'm not saying it didn't. But the craziest thing about that was that it was really the defensive side of the floor and Portland's offense floundering that changed the actual scoreboard. Trae's offense was just Trae's offense. Like, he was the one keeping the Hawks afloat because everybody else was bad in the third. Trae was the only one that was scoring. But at the end of the day, that was what's won the game, was the combination of Trae exploding and the defense getting better. He played the whole third quarter. They wobbled a little bit out of the gate in the fourth without Trae, but then actually they had a nice 5-0 stretch with TLC scored 5 points in a row. He actually hit a 3 and then had a nice cut off the bench at the back of the 4 spot. They were up by 6 when Trae came back in, but it got back down to 1 at one point. Portland scored 19 points in the first 7 minutes of the fourth, and it was definitely in peril for the majority of crunch time. It was basically between a 2-point lead and a 4-point lead, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, for like 3 or 4 full minutes in a row. Hunter had a wide open 3 that should have probably iced the game to go up by 5, but then defensively, they got to stop. It was kind of a weird possession. Ended up being an official review for a shot clock violation that the Hawks got the better of, and they had the ball up by 5 with 1:03 to go. But they had a pretty bad start to the possession coming out of that in a crucial spot. They had to call timeout with 8 seconds to go. It was actually a great call. McMillan has been criticized, even by me, for some of his stuff out of timeout this year. This is a good one. They ran a fake DHO to Hunter, sort of a fake dribble handoff. They executed it well. Kevin Chouinard asked about this after the game, but Hunter said that was the design of the play. If they had a feeling they were going to go to Trae, he could sort of pull this off, and it ended up working very well. They score there, go up by 7 points, and it should have been over at that stage. But Portland scores, the Hawks don't score, and the door is open with the Blazers only down by 5. But then Portland, showing their true colors in this game, missed, I think, 3 shots, but at least 2 shots right at the rim that would have cut the lead down to 3. Now, the Hawks would have still been in control, but it was a 5-point game. Paul gets the rebound and throws like a 40-foot outlet pass to DeLon Wright. They get a clear path foul, and they escape from there. So it got very dicey. The Hawks were leading this game by between 1 and 5 points for like a 5-6 minute stretch in the fourth quarter. It was very, very, very close. Portland never led down the stretch, but they were right there. So it was way too close for comfort. As far as the takeaways are concerned from this game, the Hawks offensively ended up with a good number in offensive rating, which is, at the end of the day, all that matters in terms of your overall efficiency. They scored about 1.17 points per possession, which is about what they average. It's a little bit better than that, actually. That's an elite figure normally. Against Portland, in this edition of Portland, that's not special at all. But the craziest stat of the night, and I tweeted this out, but I'll say it again now, the Hawks took, and when I say took, I mean attempted, 21 more shots than the Blazers. Now, there's some context to this, which we'll get into, but the Hawks took 109 field goal attempts. This is a very, very fast-paced game. The Blazers took 88. If one team attempts 21 more shots than the other team, they have a massive advantage because the math is the more shots you take, the better off you are, which means you're not turning the ball over and you're getting extra shot attempts. So the Hawks shot the ball terribly in this game, as crazy as that might sound. Even with great free throw shooting, they had 50% true shooting in the game. They were 37% from the floor and 12 of 48 from 3. That is absolutely horrible shooting. 42% effective field goal percentage. That's about as bad as it gets in a win. But the Hawks did everything else well on offense. They, number one, shot 30 of 32 at the free throw line. Trae was 11 of 11. Rowland was 4 of 4. Hunter was 5 of 6. Rowland was 6 of 7. Ball didn't take any. Bogey was 4 of 4. And as a team, again, 30 of 32, that's 94%. That's a huge, huge win. From there, 28 assists and 4 turnovers in the game. A 7-to-1 assist turnover ratio. That is off the charts. We'll get into a second about on the defense then, but the Hawks dominated the rebounding battle and the turnover battle in this game. Now, the glass was not quite as lopsided, especially because at the end, Portland had a bunch of offensive rebounds. But the Hawks were in control of the glass the entire game, and that helped to lead them to more shots. But the turnover battle was crazy, so we'll sort of use that as a bridge to the defense. But again, the Hawks managed to score at an above-average rate despite shooting the ball terribly. It's because they did everything else well. Defensively, they forced 21 turnovers in this game. That is sky high, especially if you know the Hawks very well. Atlanta is a very low turnover team defensively. They're very conservative. They don't really have a lot of playmakers defensively. So to force them with turnovers, well, I got to say that's partly on Portland, obviously. But those turnovers led to 29 points for the Hawks directly. So not only is that 17 possessions that you won, quote unquote, on turnovers versus what the Hawks committed, but also directly those leading to live ball stuff. This is the season high for the Hawks in steals with 13. That is pretty crazy as well. They ended up this game, the Hawks did, with a 106 defensive rating, and that's quite good. That's hilarious because the Hawks did not play well at all defensively for most parts in this game, but the Blazers were hitting us on offense down the stretch, alas. The Blazers did shoot much better than the Hawks did. In fact, Portland had 58% true shooting in the game. That is elite. That's like number one in the league kind of stuff offensively. But nothing else was good for Portland. It was kind of the exact opposite of the Hawks. They did cool off in the second half. McMillan credited DeLon Wright for his defense on Josh Hart in the second half. And, they shot themselves in the foot a few times. The Hawks were better defensively, I will say that. It was not great, but it was night and day from the first half, that's for sure. So, crazy, crazy box score. Crazy, crazy game. The Hawks beating a team they absolutely had to beat. I said this during the game. I say it now. Had the Hawks lost this game, it would have been the worst loss of the season. And I don't throw that around lightly. I always do the research on that. I don't just say things for the record to say them. Number one is the biggest point spread of the season for the Hawks. They had never been 14-point favorites before a game. The previous record this year was 13. So just likelihood-wise, that's already bad enough. But then you throw in the fact that the Hawks are clearly needing every win right now in their playoff race, Portland is pretty openly tanking at this point in terms of like what they're doing with their injury management, who they're playing, how they're approaching games, etc. So that combination, plus you're at home, all that stuff, it's just it would have been an excruciating loss. And the Hawks dug it out. Credit to Trae and credit to the defense for pulling it off. And with this win, the Hawks now are within a game of the Nets for 8th place in the East, and they are half game ahead of the Hornets, who won tonight for 9th place. And by the way, the Hawks go to Charlotte on Wednesday for a head-to-head battle that will actually determine, at least for that night, the spot, who has the 9th spot, who has the 10th spot in the East, at least as of Wednesday night when that game actually happens. Before we get into the player evaluations in this one and a brief look ahead at that game on Wednesday and more, a word from our sponsors on the podcast. The auto world has so many makes and models these days that it's basically impossible for your local chain store to stock all the car and truck parts that you could possibly need. And even beyond that, do you actually want to endure the questioning from the person behind the counter that just wants to sell you the brand that they happen to carry in the warehouse? Instead of doing that, you have access to rockauto.com at home or in your pocket, and that's a much better option. Why spend more for the exact same parts from a chain store or dealership when you can order them at rockauto.com? Rockauto.com is a family business serving customers for more than 20 years, and they have reliably low prices at rockauto.com for each and every customer. They have absolutely everything you could possibly need for your car or your truck. That includes brake parts and tail lamps, motor oil, and even carpet. Check out the website right now at rockauto.com to see all the parts available for your car or your truck. And when you get there, write Locked On in the box that asks you how you heard about rockauto.com so they know that we sent you to them. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, we'll dive in now to the player evaluations. And this is a mixed bag, as you might imagine, in a game that the Hawks did not play that well in. The bench was hit and miss, for sure. I mentioned before, but Knox and PLC will be backup power forwards in different halves. Knox was 0-3 from the floor, 3 rebounds in the first half. It was -3, did not score. Didn't play very well, I don't think. It's not a huge shock. But he didn't kill them defensively or anything like that. But offensively, not too much going on there. PLC had some moments when he came in the second half, at 8 minutes, had 5 points, 2 rebounds. Did miss two pretty open threes. Made his last one, which was a crucial shot. So, obviously get well soon to Gallo and Collins, and they're not as good without those guys. But they weren't just murdered by their backup power forwards in this game. I will say, I'm not someone that's been ranting and raving about Jalen Johnson not playing, but I do think it was a mistake to not have Jalen Johnson in Atlanta and playing. Now, the only thing that I could think of would be that they didn't know Gallo couldn't go until after Jalen had already gone to Westchester. That would be an explanation that I would accept for Jalen not being around and not even playing in this game. Like, given the matchup, if there was ever a game to play Jalen Johnson, no Collins, no Gallinari, bad opponent at home, fresh legs on a back-to-back, all that stuff, it would have been tonight, and he wasn't around. So that's unfortunate, but alas. Elsewhere, Lou Williams actually had 3 steals in the game. It was first game defense by his standards, but with only 4 points and 6 shots. He's cooled off a little bit on offense after a hot stretch a couple weeks ago, but he had 3 assists. He was fine in this game when he was playing alongside Trae. I don't always love that, but I get it today. Bogdanovich was ice cold. He's actually not been shooting the ball very well now for a few games after he had been just kind of out of his mind again. In fact, he's now had 5 straight bad three-point shooting games. He was 2 of 11 in Detroit, 1 of 8 in Milwaukee, 1 of 7 against the Clippers, 2 of 9 against Indiana, and 1 of 8 against Portland. So for the month of March, he's shooting like 25% from 3, and that's really a good start to the month. So for context, he was 44% in February. So it's not like Bogey is someone I'm worried about as a shooter, but he has been cold now for 5 games in a row. He did make an impact with assists. He had 6 in this game. Again, it's been a nice little playmaking step forward for him recently. 2 steals as well, but 2 of 13 from the floor, 1 of 8 from 3 is tough to overcome for Bogey. Okongwu had a pretty interesting game. 12 points, 7 rebounds, 4 defensive, 3 offensive. Had a steal, no blocks, and 4 fouls again in 20 minutes. Got to the line 7 times, made 6 of 7. That's good to see from him. Finished well around the rim. I think defensively, he had a couple of hiccups, actually, that were kind of weird for him. Fellow was the better defender for sure of the 2 in this game, but I thought Okongwu at least finished well around the rim. Was intriguing in that aspect, and his chemistry with the pick and roll operator, Lou Williams, has been good for a while. To the starters, and we're going to Capella now. He had a weird night, let's just say. 8 points, 16 rebounds to lead the team by more than double. Next on the list was Okongwu with 7. Had 2 blocks and a steal. I thought he was awesome defensively in the second half. He was pretty good in the first half. He was probably the only guy in the first half that was pretty good. But he was truly a terror after halftime. Blocks, alterations, rebounding. He was his normal dominant self. But offensively, he had a come down in this one. I guess I jinxed him last night on the podcast. We talked about how Capella had been finishing very, very well. And in fact, coming into the night, in the previous 21 games, he was shooting 71% from the floor. So you can't really fake that. And I've kind of been saying, like, his finish has been better recently. But of course, on cue, he's 4 of 12 in this game. I believe at least 3, maybe 4, maybe even all 5 of those were like tip in kind of offensive rebound putback attempts that he missed, but he was not a good finishing game for Clint. So I get all the pushback, but defensively he was a terror. Plus 13 in this game in his 28 minutes, whereas Okongwu was minus 6. I don't think that's necessarily representative, but I thought Capella was quite good despite the bad finishing, but the finishing was bad. Don't get me wrong on that. DeLon Wright was quiet. It was a very, very DeLon Wright stat line. Nate praised him. He was a game best plus 17. I thought he gave them great defensive minutes, but he didn't score in terms of from the field. He was 4-4 from the free throw line, so 4 points on 5 shooting possessions is not terrible, but 4 assists, 3 steals, a block, 4 rebounds, plus defense, plus 17. Just DeLon Wright in a nutshell. What else can I say? I love DeLon Wright. I think he makes swing plays, and I wish he'd make some more jump shots. But he's been a little bit cold, actually, along with Bogey. Early in the season, DeLon was shooting the ball pretty well. And even now, for the year, he is 36% from 3, but he has not made a 3 in March. I believe he is 0 of 10 of 3 in the month. So obviously low volume. And he shot 33% in February, but I think it's more variance than anything else. But it'd be nice if he had a little bit more shooting. That's not breaking any new ground for DeLon. Herter was cold again from 3 as well. That was kind of maybe sense in the team why the Hawks didn't shoot well from 3 this game. He was 2 of 9 from 3, 4 of 6 from 2. Did have 2 assists, 4 rebounds. Was pretty solid overall. I thought just didn't make shots from the perimeter. Neither did Bogey, so that's kind of a familiar theme. Hunter had a very bad middle of the game. He was 0 of 6 from the floor in the third quarter. Had a couple of bad misses at times, but also had a couple of big shots. The fake DHO for a bucket, an open 3 that he made in the fourth. He had 20 points overall. Took 17 shots. A couple of settling jumpers that I didn't love from him. It took 9 threes. I do like when Hunter gets threes up. He's been a good shooter this season. I believe coming into the game, he was something like 38% or something like that from 3 in the game for the season, I should say. But being up more threes is a good idea from him. 6 free throw attempts as well. Rebounding wise, still not doing what he needs to do, but had 2 steals and 2 blocks. He was active enough defensively, and that's good to see. And then finally, Trae Young, just breathtaking after halftime with 25 points. 46 points on the game, 12 assists, 6 rebounds, plus 10, 15 of 31 from the floor. Took a lot of shots. Got to the line for 11 and 11. 3-point range, he was not exactly like lighting it up. He was 5 of 14, but that's actually not too bad, to be honest with you. So the rest of the team was 7 of 34. So that tells you how bad everybody else was. But man, Trae was awesome in the second half of this game, and that's great to see. And obviously, they had to have it because everybody else, he ended up scoring 46 of their 122, but I think in the third quarter he scored more than half their points overall. Yeah, 21-31, so almost two-thirds of their points. It's a Trae Young explosion that helped the Hawks to win this game. They absolutely had to have, and they did go ahead and do that. And 93 points in 2 days. Crazy stuff from Trae. Elsewhere, looking ahead a little bit, they have a full day off on Tuesday because they had the back-to-back, of course, Sunday and Monday. And then they go to Charlotte on Wednesday, which I sort of referred to earlier. That is their shortest trip in the entire NBA is Atlanta to Charlotte, but still a road game against a Hornets team that's been a little bit better recently. A couple of weeks ago, Charlotte was very badly struggling, and I think that was not a huge shock to me. I don't think that Charlotte is the greatest team in the world or anything, but they are about a 500 team this season, and they are talented. They've now won 4 of their last 6. So this is a team that's sort of ridership a little bit, and they are talented. That's a matchup in which the Hawks should be able to score. Charlotte's a bad defensive team. They can score on their own as well. I'm planning to do a podcast in between those 2 games, but no promises. I'm planning to have some draft content in the middle of that on Tuesday evening, but we'll see what happens there. Kind of a fascinating game on Wednesday between the Hawks being the most direct competitors with the Hornets in terms of the standings, the geographic rivalry, the Southeast, 2 fun guards, of course, with LaMelo and Trae. Lots of fun stuff there. But to wrap up this podcast, the Hawks get a win. They get on the board, and they're 500 again. We'll see if they can get over 500 for the first time in a while. And then after the game, by the way, in Charlotte, if they can win that one, the schedule is still relatively okay. Now, they do have to play Memphis at home on Friday. That's a tough matchup for anybody. But then New Orleans, New York, and Detroit. So they have some opportunities, as they have for a while now. It was pretty soft, but they won this game, and now they're 34-34 with 14 games to go. So buckle up. If they win out, they'll have 48 wins. Not likely, I would say, but alas. Thank you for listening to the podcast, everybody. Hopefully that sort of clarifies all of what transpired in this game. If you have questions, the mailbag is always open at Locked On Hawks on Twitter or at BT Rowland on Twitter. Please subscribe to the show as well on your podcast platform of choice. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Please download the show. Click on the show. However you want to support the show best. And also, I've been pleading with you for a while, but I'll do it again here. Subscribe on the YouTube channel, where we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the regular season. That's be very helpful for me and the show moving forward. That's at Locked On Hawks on YouTube as well. So thank you for the support already on that. But thank you really for everything, for listening to the show and my rambling as we get into Tuesday morning here. And we'll see you at the very latest game on Wednesday, but maybe even in between. So the best way to find the podcast always is to subscribe. We'll see you next time.